Hey everybody, it's Eric. How are you today? Look at my buddy. You want to say hi, Loki? Hello. He's camped up on my shoulder today. Well, it's been quite the week for me. I lost one of my best friends, Carol. She was such a giving tree of a human being. Um, as many of you know, I have autism, but I also had long COVID for 6 years. And it didn't really make life very easy. I lost a lot of good friends, family, career. A lot of people don't know what long COVID is yet. They know what COVID is, but for a lot of people, many thousands of people, COVID triggers something inside them. There are over 200 symptoms like chronic nausea. I have a friend who has long COVID with chronic nausea. She hasn't gotten out of bed for 5 years. In my case, it was chronic insomnia. I didn't sleep very much for 5 years. And I moved to New York City to find a cure, which I did. But long COVID plus autism, though, that's a tough thing. And I've been thinking a lot about autism lately, and I'm reading a new book, well, not a new book to me, a book called NeuroTribes. It's a pretty thick book, but it's one of the best books you're ever going to read about the history of autism, about what it's like to have autism. And when I tell a lot of people I have autism, they're like, you don't have autism. Because people have an impression in their head of maybe Dustin Hoffman from Rain Man or Ben Affleck from The Accountant. The truth is, there are lots of different manifestations, forms of autism. Everything from nonverbal to somebody like me who's considered maybe high functioning, definitely can hold a job. Hey, buddy, you want to stay up here? Want to say hi to everybody? Say hello. He's not amused. But I've been thinking a lot about autism lately and what it was like to go through long COVID like that and without much support. And one of the things that Steve Silberman says in Autism, and again, it's a really wonderful book, is there's a section on labels. And it's really important to be careful about labels. And that's something that I've been thinking about lately. You know, we throw around terms like narcissist or ADHD as if they're not actual medical diagnoses. And it's really important to be careful about the labels that we assign ourselves, and especially the labels that we point at others with or assign to others. I had a really good psychologist friend, or I have one, from the University of South Carolina. His name is Dr. Scott Decker. And one thing he told me once was, it's not about the label, Eric. And frankly, a lot of adults, I didn't get diagnosed with autism until I was 48. You getting down now? I didn't get diagnosed with autism until I was 48. So I spent my whole life with this condition, not knowing it even. But he said to me, it's not the label that matters so much. It's the social impairment that you face. It's the barrier that you face in front of you. That's what's more important than a label. And one thing he always cautions his graduate students on is never assign a label to somebody unless you absolutely know for sure, because that's going to stick in the mind forever. You know, so at any rate, when I was diagnosed autistic, it was a great relief to me because suddenly all these things that I've been banging my head against the wall about forever, well, they suddenly made sense to me. I suddenly understood why I did the things I did or why others did the things they do that I don't understand. It's really hard for people to understand autism. Again, if you want to really get deep into it, read NeuroTribes by Steve Silberman. Yes, it's a thick book, but if you're autistic, if you know somebody who's autistic, maybe a family member or a close friend, it's really going to help you understand. And yes, it goes deep into the history with people like Dr. Asperger, from which the syndrome was named. But there was also a Dr. Connor who at the same time discovered it as if it was a land. Did you know that Congress once passed an act called Combating Autism? That was long ago, but I don't want autism to be combated. I don't feel like I need to be combated. I like being autistic. It's who I am. But again, back to what is autism. Here's one way to wrap your head around the subject. Autism is a unique perspective of reality. I have a good idea for a cartoon. Let's say there's this party and everybody's around the table talking and having a good time and whatever. Well, the autistic person in the corner might be just flipping the light switch over and over again, sort of fixated on it, studying it. while everybody else is doing their own thing. And in a sense, that's kind of what autism is. Whereas neurotypical people tend to go through life with blinders on. That's not a bad thing. They just sort of see one thing at a time. Autistic people tend to see everything at once. And we call that pattern recognition too. They're absorbing so much information at once, and they're sort of putting it into categories quickly and analyzing it. And, they might feel disconnected from reality, but instead they're intensely attuned to it. And that's what autism is. It's a unique perception of reality. And so, yeah, it's fair to say, if you're neurotypical, I don't see the same world that you see, which is why sometimes understanding levels can be like this, And so to get the understanding level more like this, we have to understand we don't see the world the same way. I drive a bus in New York City right now. I'm writing a book called Behind the Wheel, which is sort of a biography of New York City through a bus driver's eyes. But one of the things that calms me down the most is driving around New York City. And you might think to yourself, wait, that sounds like the craziest possible, least peaceful thing in the world. But as I'm driving, I'm processing so much, an abundance of information, sounds and sights and everything you can imagine and interactions. And to me, it's so much information coming in at once that I can process that it actually kind of brings me down to a peaceful state, even though it's a very stressful thing to do for some. And yes, sometimes it's stressful for me too. But again, back to labels. While I was suffering with long COVID and chronic insomnia and brain fog, and my life was just sort of falling apart. And if you see one of my early posts while I had it, you'd see me twitching and stuttering, having a hard time talking. Well, I was so sleep deprived that my brain was frazzled. But one of the things that was really hard for people to wrap their heads around was